Yes.
It's
Okay.
just, yes. So,
Yeah. So,
good.
you were talking about how helpful the idea of playing with the possibilities has been for you, right?
Yes.
And I would love to have you just talk more about like what that has looked like for you, like dipping your toe in the different possibilities, trying different things out. And I'm going to get myself in, hold on a second, show myself view too so that people can, there we go. Okay. Tell me about it. Playing with possibilities.
So funny because I myself personally, growing up, I was the oldest of five. And so doing a lot of the grief work piece of it for myself, I realized I really didn't play a lot as a child because I was
Mm,
doing responsibility. And I'm curious of
yeah,
if a lot of educators were either oldest child or they were the responsible or the caretaker ones in the family. And if
interesting.
so, from I'm going to speak for myself, I'm realizing now that's why I didn't play. Like I like as an adult, it's like, no, you're going to be a teacher.
Mhm.
Okay, teacher, I'm playing because I played school when I was younger because I
Right, right.
knew how to do. I knew to take care. So doing this work with you, and like I said, the grief stuff has been so hand in hand because the
Mm,
grieving was the releasing of what I wish could have been more, better, or different as an educator, as like what I wished for education, and what I wished for like the children that I taught and my colleagues. And so then, doing the work around that and using the tools to, helped me to have the space and the permission to see possibilities in a way that I didn't before. But I had
mhm.
to let go of that anger and that frustration first in order to do that. And it's still ongoing. It's still like the
Right.
but the tools that you gave, um, like I just remember it's like, okay, pretend there is no um you don't have a budget, you don't need to know the salary amount, like just play, like what would that be? And so I remember for myself it was I'm like, ooh, I like art. I'm not an artist in terms of that I can create the art, but I know how to be with the art in a way that I'm very passionate about it. So I remember going to this art museum where I was living at the time, and I said, hey, and I started talking to the docent, and she's like, would you like to be a docent? And I was like, oh, docent, oh my God, this is so fun. And even
Yeah.
though it didn't time out, she's kept coming to me, which gave me value and said, whoa, she sees something in me that
Right.
I wasn't seen or appreciated as an educator. And so then that gave me permission to explore a little bit more. And so the role that I have now with McKinney-Vento is still in education.
Mm,
However, it's on the periphery of education. I'm on the outside
yeah.
looking in, and I get to play within that in terms of what do I want to create? Do I want to create a retreat for all the McKinney-Vento liaisons? Okay, I can put that out. Let me ask my boss. She says yes. All right, we do it. You know,
Mm,
and so it's also playing within this area.
yeah.
I Then the last thing I think is that because I am a vendor and I'm not boxed into an organization, right? I have freedom within that too to play with my schedule. So now I've learned, like in the morning when I wake up, I need a little bit of time for Bernadette instead of getting up and rushing out the door. I tried doing
Mhm.
that before as an educator, but it was like we had to be at work at 7:30 in the morning, or
Yeah.
7:10. And that's just, in my opinion, that's not healthy, you know?
Mhm.
And then you're on all day long. And so
Yeah.
it's just I'm like, oh, I work better. And then now the other part too is Wednesdays, I realized I work hard Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday's my down day, and then I
Hmm.
have Thursday and Friday. Before I played with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday was my down day where I just
Uh,
so I can even do a 4-day work week now. So it's playing also with my schedule. So it's just been
right.
such a thrill, Laura. You gave me that permission, the permission slip that I needed to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And do you think that you would have been able to play with the possibilities in the same way if you didn't do some of the grief work before? Like, I don't
Um,
think all teachers think about grieving the loss of like they wouldn't necessarily use the word grieving when they think
Yep.
about leaving teaching, but I know you've often used that word, which I really appreciate because I think it makes a lot of sense. Um, and so I'm wondering the process, what you went through to grieve teaching. First of all, what was it? Like, how did you do that? And then do you feel like you could have done the playing without the grieving first?
No, no,
Yeah.
I definitely don't. I think because I think as educators, I think most educators, um, I can't speak for everybody, but the ones that I've met and communicated with, there's such a disrespect in terms of the work that's done and then how it's received in the communication. And that's a loss. That's a loss of safety and a loss of trust, the trust of you being a professional, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And then the whole piece of loss of safety is, we're having these shooter drills, and then shootings in our schools, so that's a loss of safety, and so you have loss of safety, loss of trust, and they're intangibles, but there's grief there because where I'm certified, I love their definition of grief. Grief is the normal and natural reaction to any significant loss,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's normal and natural, any significant loss. So loss of safety and loss of trust is pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
And that's an intangible. A tangible can be, the beginning of the school year, teachers move in, right? And you're moving in. I say you move in the beginning of the school year and you move out at the end of the school year. And the top three stressors in a human being are typically death, divorce, and moving,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if that's the top three, right? And there is almost like a divorce because you are leaving your children that you taught for a whole year, and maybe have even spent more time with some of their parents, right? And so this concentrated amount of time, and then there's this ending, there's a severing of that. And then you're packing up your classroom, you're moving, and because it has to get clean for the summer, you say goodbye. So there's a separation again. And then you have to get ready to start with a whole bunch of new children. And you don't know if you have the same classroom or not. So like, the other definition of loss is, of grief is uh, the loss of a significant, familiar pattern of change. So if you have this routine and then it's ending, so sometimes when children, they're crying at the end of the year and people are like, you should be excited, you know, that's hard for them. And it's hard for educators as well. Sometimes they're like, yes, I'm done. I'm happy. I'm finished. And that's great too, because it's
Yeah.
there's conflicting feelings, and that's grief as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
so leaving, when I left, that's 30 years of moving in and moving out.
Right.
30 years of different groups of students, different buildings I worked in, different cultures, And so like in one culture, I remember wearing jeans was what you wore. In another one, you wear high heels and you're in a suit. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there's all these different losses. And then just in terms of how how it ended for me. You know,
Mm-hmm.
did I choose? Did they choose? That's a whole piece of it. So then letting my body do what it needed to do at the end there, which is like, if I needed to cry, I cried. If I needed to eat, I ate. If I needed to sleep, I slept, and just listening to what my body need, and then having a witness to it. And that's where the community part came in. So absolutely, I think that's needed.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of the loss of identity, right? You're divorcing yourself from a whole part of yourself. Or maybe not divorcing yourself, but like it's a loss of stability, a loss of the known. It's all, thrown up in that. I think that is something I've heard teachers mention too, that they're grieving um that identity that was such a big part of who they were and how they identified, and how to move on from that and step into new identities or old identities they haven't stepped into for a while.
Yeah, that's true. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that was the biggest one. And that one took a longer time because until I started getting recognized in these other places for other parts of myself, that were always there, but were not celebrated or honored, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And again, speaking with other educators, it's that same thing. Those who have left, they like, I would never go back again, because where I'm at now, either it's like I can make my own schedule, or I can go to the bathroom, like even like the loss of respect that was there. And I think the grieving of what you allowed yourself to put up with, like that's huge, to be like, I can't believe I let this happen this long, and forgiving yourself for that. So they say that, in the grief recovery, they talk about getting complete. And what that means is, what are all these unresolved feelings and emotions around the relationship? So for me, I'm just going to say my relationship to my identity as an educator,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so for me, getting complete would be writing a loss line. Okay, what are all the losses that I experienced in that relationship? And what were the good things?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the bedeviling and the enshrining that had happened. Oh, the
Yeah.
summers, I get the summers off. Woohoo. Okay. That's all the way up there. And then the other thing below there was the pay was horrible and it didn't match, we're paying for our own school supplies. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just say that, right? Just using those things, or shooting drills, you know, that go longer than they should, and we don't know if it was going to be real or not real.
Right.
So those would be on the bottom line. Then after that, we're getting these tools, and we're talking about different tools of forgiveness. And forgiveness isn't forgetting, but it's acknowledging and saying, I'm no longer willing to let this happen to me again, you know? And then at the end is having somebody witness your letter to the loss, the person or the intangible. And for me, it would be saying goodbye to Bernadette, the
Yeah.
teacher, but having somebody witness that by me reading that to them, and without any comment or criticism, because
Mm-hmm.
what I experience is different from another teacher's experience. Someone else may say it was great, I had the best time as a teacher, and I don't want to say goodbye to it, but I do know it's for my higher good to leave. Okay, well, that's different, and that's okay. So the grief isn't the same either. But I think it's pretty powerful doing the work, because the more that I've been doing using these tools from this program, the freer I've been, and then more possibilities keep showing. And I think it's because it's also forgiving those parts of myself and setting that free, so that I won't be blind to only seeing this. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Yeah. I mean, that it's like, if you're stuck sort of blaming yourself and giving yourself a hard time for things, it's hard to, I mean, that's a very internal process, right? And it's hard to like look up and look around and be open to things, or to think you're worthy of things coming your
Sure.
way. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that was the other piece of it too, is so also would be on that loss relationship, right? Would be those educators, administrators who didn't see my value or worth, and that I felt like I kept trying to show it to them and it was pushed away, And again, this is my experience. I know there's other educators who've experienced that as well. They kept showing up, showing up, showing up, but the work wasn't really appreciated. And at the same time too, doing this work again is like saying, okay, so that happened, but I'm not going to let that happen again, and that's okay. That was before, and that's where you were before, Bernadette, but
Mm.
now look where you are. And so I think doing this work too, you have to want to do it, you
Yeah.
know and I knew for myself, 3 years before I ended, it took me 3 years to be really ready. I started seeing the writing on the wall 3 years before that, of realizing how dysfunctional the schools that I was teaching in were. And it was like being in an abusive relationship,
Mm.
um, where there was like power and control. And then there was a honeymoon period. And then it was like, I'm really sorry. And then, but can you do this? And like, okay, they're being okay. And then start up again. And it's the summer. It's the same thing. The summer is like, oh, it's not that bad. You know,
Right.
it's like, wait, if you're saying it's not that bad,
Yeah.
that's right there, you know?
Right. You want it to be good, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And again, this is the places that I've worked in. So,
Right.
someone may have a different experience, and that's okay too. That's great. Um, So yeah, I think it's different for each person, but I really do believe that um, that identity piece is huge, especially the longer you've been in it.
Mhm.
It's something that most people identify even outside of the school. They like my kids, their friends, or oh, you're a teacher, you should be able to da 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 da,
Right.
you know. So it follows you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and people understand on the surface level what a teacher does, right? Whereas a lot of jobs, people don't necessarily understand what that role even is. So there's an understand, people sort of have maybe a false understanding of what a teacher does, but like they know that you teach students and you know, you're in a classroom and there's some basic level of understanding. And when you move to other positions, that might disappear. People might not know what that is.
And which I think this is the other thing that was great about your course, because this helped it was great doing it because part of the work I'd done already, part of it I was still doing parallel while I was working with you.
Mm-hmm.
And another brilliant thing was this part about the skills. What are that assessment we did saying, what are the skills that you're
Burnout skills, motivated skills. Yeah.
yeah, okay. And I realized for myself, and I'm curious if other educators had this as well. Oh my gosh, okay. My burnout skills were like, I was responsible for everything. So all the skills I was told to do, okay. And so all of my motivated skills that you said you call them,
Yeah.
those skills were being like washed down in between everything else. And I was getting burnt out because
Mm-hmm.
it was like I had to do it all. And so now I am teaching still, but I'm
Right.
teaching using those skills of leadership and organizing different having alliances with different organizations and putting and making connections. So I'm using my teaching skills, but I'm using the ones that were the most motivated and less and putting the burnt out ones to the side. Like even I can even speak to it in my work. I said, at this one point, my director was just like, well, you can do da, 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 da. And for me, it's these charts, and following up with charts. And I'm like, I said, can I do it? Absolutely. I said, at the same time, too, it may take me twice as long as somebody else, and it will drain me versus doing
Right.
this creative work of creating programming and building alliances and having these presentations. And she's like, okay, you're right, I see you flourishing here, forget I said that, forget it. I was like, okay. So
Right, right. That's awesome that you could articulate it and that she was receptive because that's when you have someone who can say, "Oh yeah, you're doing great over here. Let's continue to have you work over there and like go deeper over there rather than like trying to do it all or rather than like putting you on your burnout skills, the skills that you do over and over again, maybe because you're really good at or maybe because you just have to, but you don't really enjoy it. Like that's really important to have someone recognize that and be able to act on it, right? To kind of
I
shift.
could I
Yeah,
could speak to it because of that work that we did in
right.
class, because I didn't have that framework. I didn't have the voice for that,
Yeah.
you know. And so if I don't know if I probably would be burnt out right now.
Mm-hmm.
I would have just said yes, So that's what I'm saying. Doing your program helped to really fine tune a lot of who I am and also celebrate those strengths. So there was that other one too. It's like, you're this and this and this. It was all strength
The
based.
Clifton strengths. Yeah.
And that helped a lot as well, because then there would be different job opportunities that would pop up. And I'm like, that's not going to be a good fit for me, even though maybe the pay may be great and maybe it has benefits or whatever. That's not going to be great for me. So it wasn't just saying yes to whatever showed up,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
that
and I
helped.
remember there was a moment or a couple moments where there were jobs in certain settings that were like social work oriented or like working with people in really hard times in their lives that sort of came to you or that you discovered and it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but you explored them and then went a different direction because you felt like it was not the right fit for you, even though you qualified.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm cracking up too, because literally today, my boss says to me, she's like, so who says you're not a social worker? Like
Uh-huh.
literally, because what I've been able to, again, playing again, this is the part, it's just so fun. I get to share this with you
Yeah.
because I've also created my schedule where Mondays are meeting Mondays. So on Mondays, I have my meeting and I take care of my email. So mail and meetings are on Monday. Tuesdays, I go to a shelter. I do some of this grief work. And I've also done this navigating for McKinney-Vento, helping children and their families, you know, who are temporarily housed with education, with their eliminating forced education. Wednesday, like I said, is now my down day. Thursday is my telephone day to call clients and everything like that. And then Friday, I go to one of the counties that I serve, and I just go spread the word of grief and McKinney over there. And I actually have a class that I'm starting tomorrow, which is really, so I'm teaching.
Awesome.
So I'm
Yeah.
doing different every day. The Tuesday, I'm in a shelter right now. So doing this stuff on Tuesday, they don't have a case manager. They don't, they're not following the rules, this one place. And meaning that they're a 24/7 shelter facility. And so they're supposed to be able to come and go as they please. They're supposed to have toilet paper. They're supposed to have breakfast and dinner. They're supposed to provide transportation. And none of that's happening. And so I've been working with these women, doing the McKinney-Vento piece and the grief piece. And because they feel safe with me, they started sharing all of this with me. And so I talked to the New Jersey Department of Human Services, the head. And so that's been, I don't want to say powerful like ego, but it's just like, I'm doing real work. It's matching my values, it's matching my truth. And again, if I was in a school system, I wouldn't be able to do this. I might get like a little slap on, you got to watch your lane. And I'm proud to say right now that these women are getting the tools they need and the empowerment they need, and they know where to go to get their services. And that's why my boss was like, oh, so who says you're not a social worker? So I have a little piece of that, but there's a very clear boundary. That's just Tuesdays. And I don't talk to them or deal with any of that except on Tuesdays. So I still do it, but it's very clean and clear. It's not like every day where I'm getting burnt out. If this was every day, I'd be burnt out.
Right. Well, and you're also doing it through the grief and recovery lens, right? Are you working with them around grief and recovery, the women in the shelter? Yeah. So you have a specific point of view, a specific angle that you're bringing to, it's like you're addressing a piece of their experience, right? So it's kind of like more defined and less like blurred lines.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's very clear too, like my role as McKinney-Vento navigator, you know, is to help to give them resources so their kids can, like, finding camps for them so that they can go get a job, so that when their kids are ready for school, they have a job, and then they can just flow into going into get the ideas to get into housing. Right. So what are those tools? And say, okay, here's an organization that can help you with career skills. Oh, here's the YMCA. Yeah, but we can't afford it. So that's what happened today, is that I said to them, this woman, she filled an application. She hasn't heard back. They're like, oh, she owes money last year. I said, well, she's in a shelter now. Is there any way that can get deferred? And it is. Thank you very much. So now she can go in. Now she can get her job. Now she can, so it's those pieces. But that's where the education piece of 30 years helped as well. I'm using all of those skills, right, to do that. And when I'm with these women, even though it's crazy chaos, because in the shelter, they don't have childcare for them, so the children are with them while I'm teaching, I still have my class management skills, so it's doable. But doing it every day, there's no way I would be able to do it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you have these different roles that you're playing with every day. If you like describing your work now, what kind of roles would you say you're playing? Like I'm hearing like advocate, right? Teacher. What else would you add to that list of like the different roles you have and that you're kind of playing with and seeing what you like?
Definitely advocate, definitely a teacher. I'd say facilitator, speaker. Those are probably like the top 4.
Yeah.
And I just say, like,
partnership, manage, like.
Yes, well, that's the other piece of it too, because and that's what I'm saying. Like, it's I'm having fun. Like, I love what I'm doing. I don't have benefits, but that's okay. Like, it's crazy because this is so worth it to me that I get to play in these different roles,
Mm.
and like one of them right now, 2 weeks ago, I was in a consortium of different organizations regarding the health of Warren County and then the health of Hunterdon County. And it was so great to speak to say, hey, I'm working with the temporarily housed, this population that's unhoused. They're having the reason why the numbers are bad is there's a lot of people that are unhoused and they're hiding. Some of them are in hotels, some of them are couch surfing, and you don't know that they're homeless because they're not out in the streets. And so we have all these populations that maybe they don't have transportation, maybe they don't have the support that they need to get them to point A to point B for these. They're just trying to survive. So it's great to talk from that perspective, and how grief is right now, it's an emotion, and every single human being has experienced a loss, loss of a pet, loss of a job, loss of safety, security, moving, all these different things, loss of identity, right? But our society tells us to push it down. And so if our society tells us to push it down, that's going to be internal, right? You're going to be a stuffer, I call it. You're going to stuff
Mm.
those feelings down because
Yeah.
we didn't talk about it, because you have to push through, be strong, it'll get better. Or you're an exploder, right? Those
Mm.
are the people that we have to walk on eggshells for. All of that is unresolved loss, incomplete loss, right? And so to be able to share that in all these different arenas, whether it's this health organization saying substance abuse, addiction, obesity, the loneliness epidemic, all of that is grief related,
Mhm.
as well as going to, I'm going to be speaking in 2 weeks with one of the heads of Child Protective Services in New Jersey, and talking to her about how to help the parents when they temporarily lose custody of their child.
Mm.
That's right. And there's feelings that come up. And if there's explosions, well, there's a reason for that. This is really hard. Where's the space for them to have that conversation?
Right.
So it's all over. And so that's the other thing I love about this as well. So I don't know what role that is,
Mm.
Laura. I don't know what you'd call that part of what I do, but that's something almost like every other day I'm
Yeah.
doing something like that.
I mean, you're an
Um,
educator. Like, just it sounds like you're educating so many different groups on grief and how it shows up, but you're doing it in lots of different settings.
yeah. So maybe it's
Yeah.
just educator.
Yeah. Back to educator, right? Um, what are there any roles that you would like to play with more, or like thinking back to the course and the sort of possibilities you were playing with back then? Maybe share a few other ones you were thinking about back then, but then also, are there any other possibilities that is still sort of on your radar that you'd like to explore further?
Yeah, I think it's so fun that you're saying this too, because so one of them is I do want to do something with the arts,
Mm.
and whether it's doing, like workshops and retreats around pieces of art, and expressing art through like finding pieces that relate to loss in your life and like naming them and then exploring that and having conversations around that.
Mm.
That would be just the best, so that's
Yeah.
still out there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's me connecting my arts piece. Same thing with nature. So someday I hope, my wish is to have a space. So the space that oh, that's the other thing. So the space that I'm renting,
Mm-hmm.
I'm signing a lease. I'm so excited. I
That's
never,
amazing.
like, just to have a space is like,
Right.
yeah, it's like insane. So yeah, it will be for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And as my fiance says, he's like you're putting your flag in the ground, saying this is
Yeah.
it. This is where home is. So that place has like a labyrinth outside,
Mm.
and there's a little bit of trees, but they can do things. I can do things outside as well.
Yeah.
But future visionary wise, the nature part of me, that's so healing. So I want to be doing in the future to have a space, that's my very own, and that I can share with others
Mhm.
to come and just to rest, you
Yeah.
know. I think I mentioned one of the ideas too that popped up was to have a camp
Mm.
called for adults, for a weekend called Camp Buffalo, because the buffalo runs into the storm because it doesn't want to wait and just sit there and wait for the feelings. Just like, all right, I know it's going to be bad, so let me just get right in there. Let me just feel it instead of pushing it down. Or so, yeah.
Mhm.
So, and to be playful, wouldn't be like these depressing places.
Yeah.
I'm noticing when I talk about grief, I'm smiling.
Yeah.
I want people to see that it's like, it's not this like downer thing. I mean, there is those feelings that are unpleasant, but it's also when you sit with those unpleasant feelings, there's a lightness that comes from it as well.
Yeah.
That's what this is. It's like this freedom. And that's what I wish for educators, who are
Yeah.
considering, I really, really, you're possible. I guess what I want to say is like, there is possibility in
Right.
it, so.
So I've always admired you for being for playing with a lot of possibilities and seeing the connection between different things and like jumping on opportunities. I'm wondering if it ever gets overwhelming, like all the possibilities that you have. Like, is there yeah, does it ever get overwhelming? And how, if so, like, how do you manage that? Because I think some people aren't as maybe as prone to being open to the possibilities. And maybe it's because of overwhelm, like, oh, well, I need to follow one path because that's what feels comfortable or manageable. So just curious for you as a person who thrives on it, does it ever get overwhelming?
It's so funny you're saying that. It's absolutely the best question because, okay, so here's another activity you did that was freaking awesome that can answer this question. It
Hmm.
was the critic, that
Yeah.
exercise,
The inner critic,
inner critic, and then what was the other one called?
wise self.
Wise self. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So I've had the inner critic in my mental space most of my life. And
Mm,
I've been practicing, quieting it down with the wise one, but not until I did the exercise in your program that it really became a very visceral experience.
mm,
And the wise one, what helped me with that was to do a lot of celebrating, right?
mm.
So going back to the overwhelm part was when there is a lot of overwhelm, that's that critic, coming in and trying to like almost self-sabotage it.
Yeah.
Okay, and saying like, no, see, you're not supposed to be playing Bernadette,
Mm.
and for mine, that critic was Sergeant Knoll is what I called him.
Uh-huh.
And and sometimes it would be Judge Knoll. Okay.
Yeah.
So it depends on what it was. So it was like these two different creations. And I would be judging myself for playing, and so then it would become overwhelm when it would be to prove the judge right. It would be the self-sabotaging thing. So the wise one would show up and say, hey, 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 this is a lot. You're very excited. This is like being a little kid. You're in a candy store.
Mhm.
Let's pull back for a little bit and see what tools we can use here to make this work.
Yeah.
So there was a time, probably a couple weeks, not a couple, about a month and a half ago, where I was just overwhelmed, and it burned me out. It was like a couple weekends. I was like, this isn't good because I'm like, this feels like I'm back
Mm.
teaching it. And so it was this really interesting thing that it was proving Judge Knoll right by saying, see, you can't do this, because it took me back to the chaos, the familiarity
Mhm.
I had when I was teaching,
Yeah.
where I was going, 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 come the weekend, recoup, going, 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 going.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity to set boundaries for myself. I had the opportunity to say, nobody's here telling you what to do anymore. This is
Right.
all you're doing. You get to choose. And so I created a calendar, and that's where this
Uh-huh.
schedule came into place. But I
Yeah.
had to sit with it, and not beat myself up. But I noticed the pattern. Like I was able to zoom out and be like, something's not okay here. Something's got to change. And even though like I love my boss, and I know that for the McKinney-Vento piece,
Mhm.
um, and she's not really my boss, she's like the director, but I just say boss just to keep it easy for everybody. But she's the one who, like I'm like, hey, is this okay? She loves it. She's great. But I had to say to her, because I was doing so great, right? She just kept throwing things at me. And I had to pull back and
Mm.
say, look, if you want me to do all of this, it's not going to work. I understand where you're coming from, but I am burning out and you're not going to have somebody. And then she's like, I hear it, I see it, and you don't. And I'm like, yeah, but, and it's not that she didn't care about me. And that's the old way of thinking, is just like,
Right.
oh, it's more, I needed to speak my truth with confidence and groundedness, which is not where I was before, because it was constant. There was no time for that. There was no space for that
Yeah.
to ponder and consider. So does that
Yeah.
answer your question?
Yeah, it makes me think of I was talking with a coach who works with women in tech, and she was saying that the teachers that she's worked with who have gone into tech took with them the lack of boundaries in their work. So
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
teaching is not the only field where there are no boundaries, right? There are like many employers are happy to like utilize all your wonderful, valuable skills and
Yes,
services, right? To the
yes,
max.
yes.
And she was saying that for teachers, if you don't set boundaries before you leave teaching, you're just going to take that same mindset into your next job, and you're not going to have boundaries there either. Then you're going to burn out from another job. So it was like, before you don't assume that teaching is the only
That's right.
field where there's burnout. And interestingly, in your case, it's like you're your own boss with the grief recovery, a lot of that grief recovery work. And that like having to set boundaries for yourself is something you still have to remind yourself of, because you're in charge of setting the boundaries now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is, it's so interesting you're saying that, because that's exactly right. It's like, it's
Mhm.
not like this magic wand. And I think this is the part circling back to what you were saying before regarding the grief work, right? So for me, there was like two different kinds of grief that I was going through. There was the grief on my own, where like I was listening to my body and I had put enough money aside that I could not work and just really tune into my body. That was part one. But the part two was I needed that witness and I needed that tools to get complete with it.
Mhm.
So when you do the grief recovery method, it's a course. It's not therapy, but it's therapeutic. And this is going to circle back to the boundary piece. Okay. And this is why I love it, because I'm not a therapist, but it's probably like people who are therapists are like, every single therapist should be doing this, And the
Mhm.
thing I also love about it is for people who are anti-therapy, this is great because it's a
Right.
class,
Yeah.
right? And you're getting a lot out of it and you're doing the work. I'm not doing the work. I'm just holding the space for you so you can do. So the first 3 to 4 sessions are about talking about myths and misinformation around loss. Okay. Like that there's 40 something losses, oh my God, loss of identity as an educator. That is a loss. Yes. You're grieving. Okay. What is grief? What
Mhm.
are the symptoms of grief? Numbness, roller coaster of emotions, loss of concentration. There's all these different things you learn about for that part. Then you take a loss that you have in your life, whether the person's alive or they're dead. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've enshrined them or you bedeviled them. It doesn't matter. But somebody that you wish could be more, better, or different. Okay. And so I had a parent. I used a parent for myself that I wish was more, better, and different. And most people, they usually start with a parent.
Mhm.
You do the tangible loss first, and then you can do the whole session again and do it on an intangible, such as like the loss of your identity as an educator. Okay.
Yeah.
So I did it on mine, and it was fascinating because I didn't realize dun, 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 that I had a loss of boundaries with this person till I sat and did the
Mhm.
work program and many other things, you know,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that she's bad, I'm good, I'm bad. It did the opposite. It saw her as a human being, right? And then I was able to get complete with her through these different tools. And at the end, somebody witnessed my letter to her. And it was so powerful and so beautiful that the relationship I have with her right now is so amazing, because I've been set free. And if the times before where there were buttons that were pushed, they're not pushed anymore. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all good. And so to go back to what you're saying, yeah, I think that that's how powerful this program is, the one person who I did a private session with, she was a former educator. And she came to me and she's like, I don't know why. She's like, I'm just angry all the time.
Mm.
And she realized that it was her grandmother who had taught her, who was like her, basically taught her everything. But she was so bitter of a person because of her losses, which were loss of safety and loss of trust with our government, because she was put in one of these camps, internment camps,
Mm.
and it was passed to her. And so my point, we all carry things from our primary caretaker, and then that goes into our work, whatever
Yeah.
jobs we, right? And so unless they get, she's like, Bernadette, this isn't like a grief course that you're doing. She's like, this is like, she's like, I did it for you as a favor because I know as one of your first people. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is not a grief and loss course. It is more of like getting to the root, she called it, getting like pulling the root out of what's keeping you stuck. And now it's like, I feel so much more freer than I ever been in my life. And now she's embracing her culture that she's shoved down since she was 4 years old.
Yeah.
So it's powerful stuff. So yeah, so going back to that, yeah, I think you can repeat, rinse, recycle, but if you're not doing your own work and saying, okay, it's like you date people, right? And you're like, why do I keep dating the same kind of
Right.
people?
Right.
It's the same thing, but with
Right.
work.
Or why do I keep getting the same kinds of jobs? Right? Why do I keep picking jobs that are not a good fit for me? What's the root of that? Like what keeps you going back again and again? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
This
I
is
love
so
that this conversation has ended up being on grief and play because they seem like two ends of the spectrum, but
cool.
they're very interrelated, it turns out.
Yeah, and I just love you and me ending this like smiling, because I was just gonna say that, like, I was just gonna say it's been fun playing with you for this last hour.
I know. Thanks for suggesting it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I would love to, if you don't mind, I'd love to either continue this, in some format, or
Yeah.
if you don't mind sharing it with me, because I think this
Yeah.
would be so valuable for so many people. Um,
Hmm.
I think for me, the biggest thing is I just want to normalize grief and loss, and and have people see how it can really set you free if when you sit with it, it
Yeah.
gives you the opportunity to play. And isn't that what life is supposed to be about?
Right.
So
Right. Oh, I love that what you just said. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'll wrap up this call on here, like the recorded part of it now,
okay,
but thank you for suggesting that we chat about this and
thank you.
more to come. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. This has been so great. I really, really appreciate it, Laura. Thank you for everything you've done for me. And it's just,
Yeah.
it was perfect because to share all this with you, and
Yeah.
like how you've helped me in this way. I'm just so very grateful because I feel like I'm having the life that I've always wanted.
Oh
So
my gosh, I love it so much. Thank you for being such an enthusiastic participant in the course and just everything you brought to it. And yeah, the ongoing conversations that we've had about all kinds of things. And it's been such a pleasure for real.
thank you. For real too.
For real, for real. Hold on, I'm just gonna